Hello, and welcome to the Alpha Male Podcast. The podcast where we talk about what it means to be an alpha male the right way, with God at the center where he rightfully belongs. Today we're going to be talking about having a more abundant life, maybe not in the way that you're thinking. Before the bio, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast, check out goodshepherdtraining.com. If you notice a little bit of background noise today, it's because I am outside. If you've listened for any length of time, you know that we recently had to bug out for the tunnel fire in Flagstaff, Arizona. Well, we had to bug out yesterday again. But God provides, God is our shield. We had to bug out yesterday again because of the pipeline fire. It was very close when we left to where we normally live and work. By we, I mean my wife and I. So we are bugged out again, bug out actual number 2. But we are safe and God provides. But if you hear a little bit of background noise, that's why. First and foremost, I am a servant of God, preacher, a fisher of men. God is number one in my life, and everything that I do in this podcast is no different, and I don't apologize for that. A little bit about me in the background. I grew up, I guess what you would consider a heathen. Didn't grow up a Christian, but I grew up in the southeastern United States, what most would consider very poor. Hunting and fishing and shooting. Joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. After my combat tours in Iraq, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in law enforcement for several years in LAPD. I worked patrol assignments and more specialized assignments, where by God's grace, he got me through some nasty places in this world of war zones and some of the nastiest streets in the country. Not because I am better, because God chose to have mercy on me and had a purpose for me, and I'm thankful for that. After my time in law enforcement, I was a private contractor for federal government for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify, doing private contracting work. I'm very much involved in guns and gunfighting. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I should say my primary MOS is in both branches of the military or infantry, as of one sort or another. Specialized infantry in the Marine Corps and an MOS that no longer exists. I started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I won my first gold medal even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I've been blessed by God with the talents he's given me to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. I've won most of my competitions in rifle and pistol, but I've also competed in archery and shotgun and even muzzleloader, knife throwing, hatchet throwing. I've competed in all that. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide. Like I said, I grew up hunting and fishing and shooting. I've done it to put meat on the table because I like to put food on the table with the talents God's given me. I don't apologize for that. I've done it as a professional hunter and guide. I've slain all manner of beast and guided for all manner of beast. Bear and wolf and elk and deer, mule deer, whitetail deer. I've slain ram and fallow deer and countless animals. And I don't apologize for that either. FBI certified, firearms instructor, NRA, and a bunch of other 3-letter government agency certifications. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. I've been blessed to be the commander of a tactical team, an SRT, special response team, in a large metropolitan area, where our primary job was to stop active shooters. But again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, called by God to share the good news. I said in the intro that we would talk about a more abundant life. Now, Jesus came and said,
I came that you may have life and have it more abundantly. Isn't that something we all yearn for, especially as alpha males? We yearn, we crave a more abundant life. Jesus says he came that we may have life and have it more abundantly. Or Jesus also says in another place, take heed and beware of covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of things he possesses. Because you have an abundance of things, that does not mean you have an abundant life. I know that culture and society will tell you otherwise, but I will say all that you need to do is inspect that, look at that. Look at those people in culture and society that they say are successful, that they say have the most abundant life. Movie stars and rock stars and people with more stuff, probably literally more money than they could think of stuff to spend it on. Does it seem like movie stars and rock stars have a happier, more abundant life with more peace and joy than other people? No, in fact, I'd submit, I don't know the numbers on this for sure, but if you looked at that group of people, they probably have more depression and commit suicide and things like that at a greater rate than what you would call your average run-of-the-mill middle-class people. And probably even more so than people in third world countries, people in, hunter-gatherer tribes in Africa that have almost nothing. But those people tend to be happy and well-adjusted. Why is that? Well, because Jesus doesn't lie. What he says is true. The abundance of a man's life is not in the things that you possess. If you are believing that lie in culture, turn away from that lie. That's a lie. It's not true. The abundance of your life is not dependent on the things that you possess. If you spend all your time, your waking hours, working in a cube, driving to and fro in a metal cage that you don't want to be in, to spend time in a cube that you don't want to be in an environment you don't want to be in, for stuff, more stuff than you need or care about. Is that you? That's been me before. That's kind of what, sadly, our American culture right now in the 2022 or whenever you're listening to this is predicated on. If you have a nice car, you'll be happy. If you have a nice house, you'll be happy. And you put yourself in debt to get those things, as it says in Proverbs. The borrower is a slave to the lender. Or think about that. You're a slave to your debt and the one whom you owe debt to. You spend your time striving and working for things you don't even own, for a fancy car that you probably don't care that much about, or for a much bigger house than you need. And they're not yours unless you actually own them. If you're just paying on a mortgage, that's not your house. Or if you're paying on a car payment, until you own that car, it's not yours. It belongs to somebody else. And you're working and working and working for it. Ask yourself, is it worth it? I'm not telling you the answer is no. I'm telling you, think about it like a man. Be circumspect. Use your reason. Is it actually worth it? Or do you just think it's worth it because society is telling you so? Let me share with you a bit of my testimony. I did not grow up a Christian. I grew up very poor in the southeastern United States. I grew up, just to give you an idea, we did not have a phone. We would walk downtown to a payphone back when payphones were a thing. I remember huddling in one room in a house around a kerosene heater because we didn't have money for any other heat. By God's grace and provision, we never went hungry or anything. But I grew up apart from God. Like I said, my mother, I respect my mother, but she is not a Christian. She is what I would call a heathen. She flirts with all that garbage, Eastern religion. My father never really talked of God to speak of. Not a Christian either. I grew up very poor, the bastard son of a fisherman. My mother and my father were never married. And I bought into all this garbage in the culture that if you have more stuff, you'll be happy. If you have this, you'll be happy. Well, I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I saw it as a way to escape the small town that I was from and do bigger and better things. And after that, I got a job in LAPD. Very blessed to get that job. They say less than 1% of the applicants end up getting on with LAPD. But I got that job. And they make pretty good money, especially for a poor boy from the South. Now, I wasn't a millionaire, but in law enforcement, I was very blessed to have, a nice place to live and a very nice car. In fact, I ended up with a couple of cars and a nice house in the California hills. And before I was a Christian, I thought, dating different girls would make me happy. And I had a fiance and a girlfriend and probably a couple of other girls on the side. And that's despicable to me now. But at the time, not being a Christian, I thought that all that stuff was going to make me happy. And I was miserable. I was more miserable than I had probably ever been, even though I had the most crap, the most stuff that I had probably ever had. And I think God gave me all that stuff to make me realize that there wasn't anything in that stuff. I had all that stuff and I didn't even want to live anymore. I was so miserable because I was searching for meaning and abundance in life where it didn't exist. I was searching for meaning and abundance in life in stuff, in a house, in a car, in girls. And it wasn't there. The abundance of life is not in the things that you possess. It's in your relationship with God. That's a real abundant life. After that, after I became a Christian, I literally, for a time, walked away from everything. I lived in my car for a little bit. And I was happier in that car with very few possessions, with a better relationship with God than I was without it. That's a little bit about my testimony. But that's not what today's sermon is really about. Just to let you know that I have been there. I have been in that empty life. I bought into the lie of this Western American culture and Madison Avenue and marketing that if you have this next shiny thing, it'll make you happy. Spend my time working for stuff that I didn't care about, didn't want, didn't make any difference in my life. Think about this. Do you spend your time in an office in a cubicle behind a computer and you get a paycheck and you buy stuff on Amazon that by the time you get it, you forgot that you even ordered it, don't need it, don't want it, but at the time you thought it was going to make you happy? Does that apply to you? If you feel like you have a hole in your life, you're not going to fill it with stuff. If you have a hole in your soul, all the material possessions don't fill that. It's kind of like being super hungry. You're a man that's really, really hungry, and all you have is water. And you drink that water because it's a distraction and it satiates you for a little while. It does ease the hunger pains, but it doesn't actually fulfill you. That's what it's like if you have a hole in your soul and you're trying to fill it with stuff. That hole in your soul is meant to be filled by the Creator, by the Maker, and nothing else is ever going to fill that void. The abundance of your life is not in the things that you possess. No, I'm not telling you stuff is bad in and of itself. It's not malum and say it's not evil by nature. Stuff is just stuff. And you can like stuff and you can appreciate nice things as long as you appreciate more the one who gave you those nice things, the Creator, the one who made everything and allows you to have anything. You only draw breath because He allows it. You are because He made you. You have because He gave you, and you love because He first loved you. Remember that. It's okay to have nice stuff, and I have a few nice guns. I'm very blessed. I have a good, reliable vehicle. I'm blessed with an amazing, intelligent, smart, beautiful, strong wife, and a great dog, who, as we're talking right now, is playing with a stick in front of me. I have an abundant life, but it's not the stuff in my life. It's that I have God in my life. That's what makes it abundant. So take a step back and look at your life. And I'm not telling you to do what I do. Not everybody can live the way that I live. My wife and I live a semi-nomadic life. We walked away from, having more stuff to having less stuff. Not everybody can do that, and I get that. But can you take a step back and look at your life and maybe prioritize and see if you're not disproportionately spending time on stuff that you don't want or don't need. Think about where your focus is. And I get distracted like everybody else. I sometimes get too focused on the next shiny thing that I want. I'm not immune from this. I'm not trying to make you think like I have it all figured out. But take a step back and look for yourself and think, am I focused on the right things? Is my life built on the right things? Last week I was managing a firearms and training company, and we got a delivery of 15 safes, 12 safes, I don't remember exactly, but a lot of safes. And we got in 2 safes that were just giant. We're talking gun safes. They weigh several thousand pounds. They're huge. And I remember people were marking out how big and nice these safes were. And I remember thinking, I think I even said to the coworkers, like, I hope I don't ever have a safe that big. Because there's no way you can actually use that many guns. And I love guns. If you know, I do a whole other podcast called Gunfighter Life. I like guns. I've been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life. I like nice guns. But I tell myself it's not being a gun collector. I'm a gun fighter. And if I have guns that I don't use, they're not really doing anything for me. No, I have a few guns I don't use that often, specialty guns, because I can't hunt big game all year round in most places because it's illegal, so I only use them seasonally or things like that. But if it's a gun I'm not using and I don't plan to use, what am I doing with it? That made me think of recently, we had bought something like 40 guns from an estate sale from a man that had passed on. And a lot of those guns, just from my expert opinion looking at them, I don't think they'd ever been fired. Just buy guns and put them in a safe, buy guns and put them in a safe. I mean, that's just not me. Like I said, I appreciate nice things, and if I have a nice gun, I use it. And people that listen and are in my Patreon circle, they know that I break guns a lot. I broke my SIG 226 several times in the past month. I like nice things, but I use them. I don't want to be the guy that dies with a giant safe with a bunch of guns in it that goes to somebody else at auction. I'd rather spend that time with a few guns out in the field, walking by a stream with my dog with a, decent shotgun in my hand that I've trained with and practiced with and patterned, and with a sidearm on my hip that I'm competent with and confident with, that God's blessed me to take different animals with and hunt with and use for defense. Again, the stuff itself is not bad. It's when you let it consume you like a fungus or a weed that takes root and just anchors in and chokes out other good things. It's not that a weed is bad. I mean, a weed is just a thing a term that we make, but it's a plant that has a purpose. It just probably doesn't belong in the garden. Is that weed, is that stuff taking up a place in your life that should be occupied by something else? The existence of that weed is fine. Just don't let it take root where it doesn't belong in your heart. I want to tell you that I've walked the walk. I shared with you a little bit about when I became a Christian and I left a more prestigious, pretty high-paying job in law enforcement. And that's not the only time I've walked away from big chunks of my possessions. One of the things I love about my wife when we were early on in our relationship, she had a really nice apartment and she got a good deal on it, which is why she had it. She knew the people that owned it. It was very big. I mean, it was an apartment, a condo, but it was still very big. And there was nice furniture and stuff in it. And usually when we ate dinner, we would sit on the floor and eat dinner. And when I met my wife, she talked about how she wanted to live small and live tiny. Well, we, by God's grace, saved up money by His provision, and we got a little camper. If you guys don't know, that's where we live now. Like I said, we're semi-nomadic. We live in my wife says about 150 square feet, and probably 40% of that is our home gym. And now there's a thing called Gym Pass where you can travel around and use different gyms. We're actually talking about getting a smaller camper. Now, we already own this one, so we might keep it, but our aspiration in life is not to get bigger, but to get smaller. We were on a walk with somebody yesterday. As I said, we bugged out, and we had somebody with us that was staying with all these big, giant campers, like much, much bigger than we have. And they're like, oh, those are nice. What about those? Like, and we were thinking we want to go smaller, not more. Like we don't want more stuff, because by God's grace, my wife and I both understand that the abundance of life does not consist in the things that you possess. We're often happier when we get rid of stuff as opposed to get more stuff. And again, that lifestyle is not for everybody. Maybe it calls to you, maybe it doesn't. You know, electricity and hot running water are nice. I'm not going to lie. They don't equal an abundant life. As somebody that routinely lives off-grid or semi-off-grid or things like that, a right relationship with God, with my neighbor, with my wife, is more than the sum of a bunch of other stuff. I guess with that, I'll start to transition into an update. So, in talking about this, and I didn't plan on this happening today, and I have been planning on this. Again, if you're in the patron circle, you know about this because I announced it a long time ago that I was planning on this, but I don't like to announce stuff on the podcast. I don't want to be the kind of man that promises something and then delays and delays and delays, and then I hope to be a man of my word and deliver what I say I'm going to deliver. If you know or don't know, I have until yesterday, I guess, been the general manager of a firearms and training company. And I took that job, and I'm not going to say anything bad about my boss, but I took that job with the condition that it was a salary position. And let's just say his idea of salary and mine are different in that their idea of salary would be me sitting behind a desk from 9:30 in the morning till 7:30 at night, whether or not I got all my work done. And that's maybe a podcast for another time. But anyway, I sat down with him a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now, and he asked me, you know, what I thought of the job and how it was going. And I told him that I did not plan on staying. I did not want to stay, that I was a man of my word and I would stay up until our agreement was over. And he asked me to stay a few weeks longer because he needed the help there and needed somebody to work it. And anyway, he'd been good to me, and I told him that I would stay longer, maybe 5 or 6 weeks more. That's a lot longer than was customary. But again, it's a good job. It was a cake job. It was super easy. There's a lot of good things about that job, but I didn't want to spend my life again stuck in a cubicle behind a desk. I've been there. I've lived in the corporate world in a big city and made ridiculously good money. This was after I was a police officer. But I didn't want that life. I don't want to be stuck in a cubicle. I don't want to be stuck behind a desk, even if it is easy, even if the money is good. That's not an abundant life to me. So I told him I was leaving. As I told you, we bugged out yesterday because of fire. And whether it's because this fire is bigger and closer than the last one, I think. Maybe not bigger yet, but at least growing faster. And last time we were closed down for like a week, he was expecting me to stay a few more weeks, but since we're going to be closed anyway, by God's grace, we had found other people to work. I had been training my replacement. He told me yesterday, he called me, and since they were evacuating, the whole area is evacuated anyway for fire, he said that, you know, that could be my last day and I didn't have to work anymore. So by God's grace, again, walking away from that security, from that perceived wealth, hopefully an even more abundant life. One of the reasons I told him I didn't want to stay at that job was for you guys, for this podcast, for the Alpha Male Podcast, Gunfighter Life, and if you don't know, the flagship, Simple Man Sermons. Even though I spent most of my time at that job, I consider this my profession, sharing with you the truth. I consider that my calling in life, sitting behind a desk doing admin work and paperwork. So I'm walking away from that salary, from that perceived security, because I worked 6 days in a row last week. I'm not complaining. I'm a blessed man to have had that job. But working from 9:30 in the morning till 7, after 7 o'clock at night, still trying to get in, at least 2 Bible readings and prayer sessions a day and 2 workouts a day, and being a husband to my wife and a good owner to my dog. And then trying to get you guys out several podcasts a week. It just was not an abundant life. It was a hectic, overcrowded life. And I was not giving the attention, effort. I was not able to give the time and effort to this podcast that I think it could be. just like the old days, upload something, just talking to the iPhone or talking to the computer and upload it. I wouldn't listen to it. I wouldn't edit it. I wouldn't do any of those things. I would think that there was a lot more that I could say, but I just literally didn't have time. My wife would long since be in bed and I would be up podcasting. I would have to cut it short so I could get, a decent amount of sleep for the next day. So again, I announced that I was leaving that job, and by God's grace, that happened yesterday. The boss, he said that could be my last day. And again, I wanted to be good to him because he hadn't done anything really wrong to me. But with that announcement, the wife and I, by God's grace, at that job, I was able to have some self-discipline and not spend a ton of money and save quite a bit of money. Right now, this podcast only makes a few $100s a month. But I'm okay with that. I'm willing to step out in faith. I'm willing to, dig into savings during the transition. I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. I'll likely sell off some guns that I'm not using to have some skin in the game, to have some stake in the game. And if you guys don't know, I did this podcast for years and years at a loss, at a financial loss, that is. I don't measure things based on money. I did my podcast for years and years, literally paying for it, working other jobs to pay to get the podcast out. Until, by God's grace, one day somebody reached out to me and asked if they could support. And I thought, wow, somebody's willing to actually put some of their resources into this. Maybe it's worth something more. I believe that now. So if you've been listening, if this isn't your first time listening, you want to help support this podcast and grow it so that it can be more, so that I can put more, by God's grace, time and dedication into this and research and actually editing things. And hopefully you guys will think that I'm doing a better job in the future with the amount of time being able to dedicate to it. I hope to put out several podcasts a week, between Alpha Male and Gunfighter Life and Simple Man Sermons. Hope that you guys will think that this is worth supporting, a ministry, a message worth supporting, a message worth getting out there. Think this is something other people should hear, then you can do that by supporting the podcast. If you've been thinking about it and you haven't yet, and it's on your heart to support the podcast, support the ministry, please consider going to goodshepherdtraining.com and going to the Patreon tab for whatever you feel like giving. Instead of maybe ordering that next thing on Amazon that you'll probably forget about before you get it, maybe consider supporting the message. I have seen numbers on how many people listen and download this podcast. A small fraction would support, then I have no doubt that God would prosper this podcast to be even better than it is now, and more men would get to hear it and get to hear the truth. A message I think is needed for combating the lies in culture and society today. I hope that you think that too and will consider supporting. Again, goodshepherdtraining.com, and then there's a Patreon tab right on there. I want you to support, number one, because you believe in the message and you think that it's worth it. Patrons do get other stuff, though. By God's grace, lately we have an insider chat. If you become a patron, you're welcome to join that chat. And it's on Facebook Messenger, and it's a closed group for patrons. And it's really cool. It's like a virtual tribe. So if you're lacking that, muscular Christianity in your life of good Christian men that, talk about good Christian things and all manner of topics. It's not just me like it is now talking to you on a microphone. It's a group of like-minded men helping each other. Be a part of that on Patreon. I also do some insider content just for patrons. I have some other ideas that will go out to the patrons, but again, I don't want to announce those until I can deliver those or get started on those at least. With that, I want to say thanks for listening to the end of the episode. With that, I'm going to go to the tactical tip of the day. I hear that a lot of you guys like the tactical tip of the day. I'll give you two today. The first one is going to be about guns and gunfighting and a useful tip there. I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, so I'll give you another one. But the first one is, I've been doing this so long I kind of forget about it. The patrons have already known about it for a while. But for CQB, close quarters battle, right behind your front sight on the slide of your pistol, guess you could do it on the barrel of your revolver, take an obnoxiously bright colored piece of tape or a sticker. I'm talking big, like a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch square or diamond or triangle, doesn't really matter, or like even bigger, a 1-inch circle. And you take that and you put it on the slide right behind the front sight. And if you're shooting super fast and super close, you can pick that up much faster than you can generally pick up a front sight. In gunfighting, many times the first person to get off a fast, accurate hit wins. Not always, but a lot of the time. So give yourself every advantage in getting that first shot off accurately. And at close distances, if you practice picking up that big obnoxiously colored piece of duct tape or sticker on that slide right behind your front sight, it basically becomes like a giant, easy to pick up front sight. If you have time to get a proper sight picture, it just disappears and goes away, and you just pick up your normal sight picture, whether that's with an optical dot sight on your handgun or with traditional iron sights. Once that handgun becomes level, that thing disappears and you can't see it, so it's not a distraction. But in your coming up, in the quick draw, getting that metal on meat to get that first fast shot off can really help you pick up the front of that pistol, use it as a crude front sight, or even pick up the front sight faster, because once you see that and you go to get level, that's where your front sight is. The next tactical tip is going to be on preserving food. If you look around, you'll probably see that I can't see the future, but it's a lot of indicators that hard times, especially as far as food, might be ahead. And what's a more manly food than a big old chunk of red meat? Well, there's a couple of ways to preserve red meat, especially game meat. Now, if you're going to do this, game meat works best, but any lean cut, this is not a thing to be done with meat with fat on it. So trim your fat off or get a lean cut of meat. If you've never heard of biltong is awesome. It is like the alpha male version of jerky. Look up how to make it. Be safe. I'm not a doctor, but I've made it plenty of times and I'm still alive. Never gotten sick from any meat that I've ever eaten, and I've eaten raw meat and raw animals. As far as biltong goes, you get a big thick cut of meat, not like that thin, beta male jerky you buy at the store, but like a big thick, I'm talking an inch or more. And you soak that in salt and vinegar. Anyway, salt, and even salt and pepper, or salt and some other kind of spicy pepper, ghost pepper. The wife and I love ghost pepper. You can add different spices to it if you want, as long as those spices don't contain sugar or things that are going to go bad or rancid. But vinegar and salt, and soak the meat in there, let it draw some more of that blood out, let it soak in. And if you live in a very dry climate like Wyoming or somewhere like that, and in a time of year where there's not a lot of bugs, where you can hang that meat, you can literally dip it in the salt and vinegar and then hang it on a coat hanger or something and let it dry out. Becomes biltong. Also, a way to make this and a way to make jerky. If you don't know, you don't need one of those fancy dehydrators. You can put your oven, if you have an oven, on the very lowest setting and take like a wooden spoon and prop the door open, that wooden spoon or something else that's not going to burn, and put the oven on the very lowest setting. And basically it just circulates hot, dry air. And if your wife cares about being clean and things like that, as my wife does, you might want to put down some aluminum foil so she doesn't get super mad and you make the oven a mess. But just put a sheet down on the bottom so all the stuff that drips down won't make a mess. And you can literally just lay it on the racks that are in the oven and check it every couple of hours. When it seems like it's preserved dry meat, it's preserved dry meat. It's not rocket science. And again, you can make biltong. A lot of times when I lived in a place where I was blessed to be able to take multiple deer, a lot of times a big majority of that second deer would become this kind of preserved meat. Anyway, biltong. Look it up, look into it, look up some different recipes, make it however you want to make it, but don't overcomplicate it. Primitive cultures have been preserving meat like this in different manners and different forms for thousands of years. So if you want to know how to preserve meat, maybe look into that. And a big slab of meat, maybe an inch thick, make sure it's lean, dip it in some salt and vinegar, maybe some pepper, and then hang it up to dry in a dry environment, free from bugs, or in that oven with the door propped open on the lowest setting. Day when you're around the house doing stuff anyway, and check it periodically. If there's no fluids or moisture coming out of it, it's probably good. With that, men, the more important than the tactical tip of the day, the tactical verse of the day. One of my go-to favorite verses that by God's grace I hopefully recite every day. Mark 11:24. Whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. Whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. Notice the divine order. Believe that you receive first, and then you will have. As the Bible says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the things not yet seen. You have faith in God. He who comes to God must believe that He is, and He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. You believe first that God will provide. Have confidence, have faith that God will provide. Whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. With that, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.